Hello everyone. Come on in. It's Anna Foster, CEO and founder of a Maven's World lifestyle brand. Thank you for joining today's session number 4, which is part of our Future of Women of Color series by Maven's World in celebration of our 10th year anniversary of our women's conference. We are excited to host 2 amazing women, Juliette Mayers, who is going to be our featured speaker today. And Juliette is a professional coach, an author, a speaker, and just an amazing woman all around. And she is going to be teaching us how to connect, how to build an effective network. And this session is going to be moderated by Nathalie Gauthier of State Street Bank. I am so excited to host both of these women on the Maven's World platform. I've followed them for many, many years, and when we were doing our in-person events, it was always a pleasure to see them out in the space celebrating all the amazing women that were in attendance. So without further ado, please share this video with other amazing women in your network. And I certainly am appreciative of all of you being here today and consider you an amazing part of my network. This is a session you do not want to miss. So sit tight wherever you are, as you can view this from your car, you can view this from your desk, you can view this from your home, but make sure you do not miss it. So thank you for being here for part 4 of the Future of Women of Color series by A Maven's World.
Hello. Thank you, Anna. I really appreciate that. My name is Nathalie Gauthier. I'm a vice president at State Street, and I want to welcome you all for joining us here today to part 4, as Anna just mentioned. It is Achieve Success Through Networking. So this wonderful series has been going on, and hopefully you will get all the tips. So grab your notebooks, and appreciate you joining us today. I have been at State Street for 13 years now. I am, as I mentioned, vice president of our talent marketplace division, and I am also the co-chair for our Professional Women's Network group. I'm very fortunate to be a part of our Inclusion Diversity Council as well, and have been a part of several boards, specifically Neighborhood House Charter School, and State Street's first Rising Star back in 2020. So enough about me. I want to share with you about our interesting and dynamic and amazing, powerful, insightful guest that we have here today. We have Juliette Mayers. And you know, Juliette's mission has been to just help others achieve their dreams. She's written books. She's been on keynote presentations. She has a strategic consulting practice, Inspiration Zone, that you will learn a lot about today. And you'll be learning a lot about what she's been sharing with corporations nationwide. Juliette's business, actually, she's been a business executive for over 30 years of marketing, financial services, strategy, and leadership development. Her corporate career included leadership roles at GE Capital, Bank Boston, the Ad Club of Greater Boston, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of MA. She has a track record of delivering results, leading innovation, and inspiring audiences like she will be doing today. So really appreciate you joining us. Please feel free to share. Juliette is actually the founder and CEO of the Inspiration Zone. She consults Fortune 500 companies and nonprofit companies. And the Inspiration Zone works with clients to create optimization of business strategies, strategic planning, stakeholder analysis, and leadership development and networking. And she's actually on the Forbes Coaches Council as well, and is a trusted advisor for senior executives and employee resource groups. So another great reason to be reaching out to her thereafter. Juliette is a host of Entering the Inspiration Zone, a bi-weekly podcast for professionals and entrepreneurs seeking for positive connection, professional development. And there's a recent one that just got launched this week. So hopefully you'll be able to catch that as well after our session. She's currently serving on the Mass Higher State Workforce Board, an appointee of Governor Baker, and is a board ambassador for Eastern Bank. She also serves on the Boston Women's Workforce Council and is emeritus board president for Action for Boston's Community Development, affectionately known as ABCD. She is the recipient of numerous awards as a trailblazing DE&I consultant, and she's an author of 2 books. First, The Guide of Strategic Networking and A Black Woman's Guide to Networking, and we'll be sharing the links for that as well. So that you can go and check those out. She earned her master's from Simmons University, where she was recently honored with the Phyllis Rappaport Alumni Achievement Award for Outstanding Achievement in the field of management. And she is a graduate of Northeastern University, earning her degree in marketing. So please welcome Juliette Mayers.
Thank you, Nathalie.
Thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
So we'll get right into it. I know we've got some, attendees already in the room, and I'm sure everyone is excited to hear about what you're going to be sharing with them. You know, achieving success through networking, that tricky word that everyone's like, I think I know, I can do this. So let's just start with exactly that. Like, what inspired you to write a book about networking?
Well, thank you. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And congratulations, Anna, on 10 years in business and doing such a fabulous job supporting women. And so what inspired me? In order to answer that question, I need to really help people understand where I came from. I am originally from the island of Barbados, West Indies. And a lot of people don't realize they see me now and they think, oh, what Juliette's so successful, it's great. Well, it didn't start out that way. I grew up in a 2-room shack, no running water, no electricity, and an outhouse. My mom was a single mom of 3 girls at the time. And for me, life was very difficult as a child. However, my mother, not once did she say, you can't be anything. It was actually the opposite. So she would always say, I want you to dream big. She had 4 things she wanted me to do. She said, I want you to get a good education, because she knew education was the way out. I want you to marry a good man. And I want you to buy a nice home. And I want you to serve God, because you need to nurture your spirituality. And so she had all these big dreams. And of course, I'm looking around and thinking, okay, I'm not quite seeing this at the moment. However, one other thing that was really critical that she taught me is to never let your circumstances, whatever that they may be at the time, define you, but to stay focused on where you want to go. And so she had the equivalent of a 5th grade education and actually dropped out of school to help with her siblings and never went back. However, she was the most brilliant woman. She understood the power of connection. She understood the power of relationships. And so these little deposits at the time I thought were so little that she put in me, I actually held on to that. So fast forward, coming to the United States and seeing my mother come over, work really hard, support me in getting my education and a host of other things. And sadly, when she passed away at the young age of 57, I was sad, but I also felt really happy for her, because she had lived to see her dreams realized. And every single one of those things that she had on the list that she wanted me to accomplish had been accomplished. So when I thought about and reflected about her life, I thought, wow, she was really an effective networker. She would never, ever use those words because it was not something that she was necessarily familiar with. However, that's what she did. She had a dream. She set goals. She worked hard. She supported me in doing the same. And because of that, she realized her dream. So I came up with this basic framework as a result of that. And it's dream, plan, create, achieve. And that was the basis for the 2 books that I wrote. And so she really was and continues to be my inspiration.
Oh, that's such a beautiful story. I appreciate you sharing that with us. We have that in common. It's unfortunate to join the club of mothers who have gone to their homegoing, but those lessons, are truly what resonate and stay with us. So I do appreciate you sharing that. And likewise, my mom was a force to be reckoned with. And the key that you shared was exactly that, what continues forward and what this strong Black queen was able to share with you. You wrote a couple of books there, The Guide to Networking and The Black Woman's Guide to Networking. Can you actually share specifically, do you think that networking is different for Black women? Can you highlight that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah. So A Black Woman's Guide to Networking was my very first book, and The Guide to Strategic Networking was the second book, and that came out in 2015. And quite frankly, I wrote A Black Woman's Guide to Networking. For me, it was the book I didn't have, and it was the book I was seeking. And when I would read all of these other books, they didn't really address the nuances that I was experiencing in the corporate workplace and in my community and so forth. And so I was seeking, what's different here. And what's different is oftentimes we as women of color and Black women don't necessarily have the mentors, sponsors, and the foundation that a lot of our white counterparts start out with. Not to say that all white people start from a place of privilege. I'm not saying that at all, but I am saying, and the data has shown that for us, the struggle is real. Unfortunately, we have the biggest wealth gap. We have the worst in terms of health disparities, and on and on. So when I looked at what I needed to hear, how I needed to be supported, and how I needed to move forward, I had to go and build that network that I didn't have. And quite frankly, I thought about my mom. I said, my mother, who didn't have a formal education, didn't have the degrees and fancy credentials that I have. And if she could do it, so can I. And so she really was my inspiration. And so as I got involved in these different community events on not-for-profit boards and so forth, I kept those principles in mind. And so those are what I use, and those are what I wrote about. So to answer your question, though, in terms of what's different, the difference is, unfortunately, we live in a world of bias. We live in a world where the exact same behaviors for Black women are perceived differently than for our white counterparts. So to give you a specific example, I was in a room, I'm not going to give too many descriptions. I've worked with a lot of organizations to protect the guilty. I was in a room with my colleagues who happened to be white men. So most of them were white men. There was one other person in the room who was a white female, but the majority, and there were about 12 of them, were white men. And so we were going back and forth. People were debating about, this topic and so forth. And I have never been shy. Even though I'm an introvert, I have learned to speak up and use my voice. So I jumped into the conversation, shared my view, and it was like, why is Juliette so angry? I'm like, I'm not angry, and the same tonality and the same banter that it was just, the guys debating, for me, was interpreted as the angry Black woman. And unfortunately, that's something that plays out all too common for us. And so I wanted to address a lot of those differences and how we're perceived in the workplace and so forth. And that's the reason I wanted to be very specific and intentional in addressing the nuances for Black women. But I also want to say the book, as you will see if you go on to Amazon and look at the reviews and so forth, a lot of other people picked up the book and thought, oh my gosh, we can relate to a lot of this, not necessarily all of it, but I wanted to bridge that cross-cultural bridge as well for people who were looking to better understand women of color.
Well, I certainly appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience will appreciate it as well. So I know that there are folks in the chat saying they've got the book, and so many people are thanking you for having written that. We'll be sharing the links as well, so you can find that, all of our attendees here today. So thank you for that. Already some great gems, dream, plan, achieve, make that your formula. And there is a strategic networking plan that does work a different dynamic for women of color. And yet our allies need to acknowledge some of those struggles and put out their hands. So, both of your books do focus on strategic networking and the nuances, no matter where your standpoint is. But how do you define strategic networking? If we can get into that, the meat of the matter there a little bit more.
Yeah, great question. And so strategic networking is networking in a way that is aligned with your vision and your plan, I should say, and your strategy, which is essentially, how I break that down is you need to have a plan. And so the first part is about dreaming big, right? So if I go back to the example of my mother, she had this big dream, didn't necessarily see how it was going to be realized at the time. And so wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you get clarity on what it is that you're trying to achieve. Because when you don't have clarity, it's hard to know where to focus and how to spend your energy. And we all have very limited time. The one thing that we have in common is the same amount of time, right? And so we have to figure out how to be strategic about how we use that time. So the first part is about coming up with that vision and getting clarity on what it is you're trying to achieve. And the second part is being specific and intentional about your goals. So now that you have that goal, that dream, what specific goals are you going to put in place to help to realize that? And there's this quote by Colin Powell that, a dream doesn't become a reality without sweat and hard work. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially it's, you've got to put some sweat equity into it in order to achieve your dream. And so having that plan is the second part. And the third part is about alignment, right? The whole point of getting clarity around your vision and your goals is because now you need to figure out how to align your activities, your relationships, and all of that towards achievement of your ultimate long-term goal. And so it's a very deliberate and intentional approach to how you spend your time and so forth. And a lot goes into that, of course, because it's not something you can do overnight. I know a lot of people are like, okay, so how do you can't do it overnight. However, you can write your plan overnight and get position the right people in your lives, get rid of the people who are detracting from your plan, right? Minimize the amount of time you spend with them and spend more time with the people that matter and that are aligned with moving you towards the direction that you'd like to go in.
You certainly can do that. And people should be always distinguishing the two, right? The folks that are no longer in alignment with your plan, you need to figure out an exit plan. And do appreciate. So it's aligning with your vision and your dream and first gaining clarity on that. And then and there's something to be said about the universe making a way once you do have clarity about the plan.
Absolutely.
You said something key that I think a lot of our attendees today would really like to just jump into even further. Women of color, as we both know, and I'm sure a lot of our audience members, we face a lot of barriers and a lot of microaggressions, a lot of subliminal ones, and unfortunately, some overt ones as well, right? Yeah. But what about the women who have the credentials? They've earned it, they've gotten the experience, they've attended all the events like these, Maven's World and the Future of Women of Color series, and they've done all the right things, and they're just still not advancing. What are some of the keys that we can share here that they just need to continue to step forward?
Yeah, and it's an excellent question, and quite frankly, I had found myself in that place where, I was feeling stuck. I had the same, as you said, the credentials and, all of these, all of the boxes checked that I should have had checked. And yet I was not progressing at the rate that I thought I should have been progressing at, particularly when I saw some of my other folks who may not have had half of the credentials, skills, or even some of them had quite aggressive personalities. And so that can be very frustrating. And so the first thing I say is, let's check our attitudes and assume positive intent, even if you feel it's not positive. In order for us to have a breakthrough experience and to really get from that place of being stuck, we have to take an inventory of how we're feeling, of our attitudes, and get your mind right, get what you're saying right, and make sure you put yourself in a positive light. And you also need to reflect on, why is that? So I'll go back to the example that I used, right, where I was in that room with all of these mostly guys, and being, thought of as being angry, and that made me angry, quite frankly. I wasn't angry, but now I'm angry. Um, and I had to think about it and said, okay, why did people perceive me that way? What was it about me? And I'm not saying blame the victim. However, we have some control over how people receive us and perceive us. And so I think of that as your personal brand. And to be clear about what I mean about personal brand, your personal brand is the embodiment of who and what you represent in the mind of others, right? So think about that for a minute. It's the embodiment of who and what you represent in the mind of others. And so you could say, well, that's their issue, how they perceive me. However, if you want to progress, if you want to get unstuck, you have to think about what is within your power. What can you do to change the dynamic, to take control of the situation, to get from that stuck place? And so personal branding is one of the ways in which I felt that was a very useful tool for me in getting unstuck. And so in my case, I decided, you know what? I'm not going to allow people to slap that angry Black woman label on me. And I am going to pay more attention to my tone, because there is unconscious bias. And yes, there is real bias too. However, in this situation, what do I need to do? What can I do differently? And so I decided that, I'm going to make sure I start communicating in a way and messaging in a way that I want people to talk about me. And so I said, I'm going to give them the words to describe me. And quite frankly, one of the books that I was inspired by too was Carla Harris's book, and I thought that's also an excellent book. And so I thought, I'll give them the words to use. So I started referring to myself in the ways I wanted, right? So if I'm in a meeting and I'm finding that people are either not paying attention or I'm not getting the same attention or whatever, I learned the art of asking questions strategically and in a way that was approachable. So for example, with that same group, I might say, well, that's interesting. So help me understand what you meant by X. And what that does is it puts the burden on them to respond, takes the attention off of me, gives me time to think, and if I am angry, to collect my thoughts. And I also decided to raise my visibility from a brand standpoint. And I said, okay, how can I do that? I made sure that my accomplishments were in writing, and that I actually spent time going around and talking to key people about what I was doing, making sure that they knew what my accomplishments were. I got involved externally outside of the organization. I got involved with boards, then became board chair of a major organization, and did things to change the dynamic and also to elevate my brand. And so all of these things, and there are many others that I mentioned in the books, are things that were in my control. I couldn't control how people thought about me. I couldn't control not being one of the guys. Can't control that I'm Black, or I can't. There are a lot of things I couldn't control, but what I could control was how I wanted people to view my brand. And also, so let's say you did all of these things and it's still not working. It's time to go. It's time to get walking, okay? Because at some point you have to prioritize your mental health. But first start with what you can do. What are the things within your power to change and to adapt in order to increase your effectiveness and to work on cultivating those critical relationships in order to help move yourself forward.
Okay. Well, of course, once again, so many gems in there that I'm hoping everyone is taking notes feverishly like I am. But that was just such gold there that you said, check yourself, check your own mind, right? Make sure your mind is right. Reflect that personal brand, definition and examples that you share there was such a key part in how you can really make it a strategic networking, right? When people think of networking, it's all right, I'm going to meet folks, I'm going to connect with folks, I'm going to look at opportunities, but networking is about who are you presenting? So that personal brand, they're networking with you. So who are you bringing to the table? So key. So hopefully folks are doing that assessment and of course, ask the questions to pivot what that can be. So speaking of pivot, I'm going to just shift us a little bit because of your expertise, right? You are diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant for many firms, and it's a significant part of your business and definitely a reason why a lot of folks have joined us today as well. So what is your view of DE&I and what does that mean to women of color post, George Floyd era, post pandemic, where we are now? So how can we dive into that a bit more?
Yeah, I think that this is a wonderful time, and I have to say, I am very pleased. I, like everybody else, was just shocked, stunned, a lot of adjectives that I could use when George Floyd was murdered, right? And I prayed that something positive would come out of this. And I do believe that there have been some positive and pivotal things that have happened since that time. Aside from the many, many corporate commitments that organizations have made, it's great. As you mentioned, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a core part of some of the work that I do. And at the same time, I don't really put a lot of stock into what people say. I put a lot of stock into what people do. And so for women of color in this moment in time, I do think there's an opportunity for us to really seize the moment to bring about meaningful change. So if you're in an organization where you have tried all of the things that I talked about, and even after this incident and after all of the initiatives that have come out of it, you're still not moving forward, I do advise you to look elsewhere. But your question is about, what's my view of DE&I and in that, because I get that a lot. Do people think that things have changed? I do think that was a defining moment in the DEI space. And the reason is more people are paying attention, more people are putting meaningful initiatives in place, barring the many pronouncements. I'm seeing companies actually invest in people. Now, are all companies doing that? No. However, a lot of them are. So I would say lean into that space. Make sure you are positioning yourself for success. And again, as it relates to the networking, it's really important that you look at who are the critical people and relationships within your organization and outside of your organization, because it's important to network not just externally, but internally. I think sometimes we spend too much time on the external and people don't think of the internal people as a network. However, they are. And it's just as important that you spend the time cultivating those relationships, the people on your team, the people in other departments, the people who are your superiors, and making sure that you are paying attention to, well, how do they align to your vision of where it is that you want to go? And how can you give them the words and make sure that you are positioning yourself and your brand for success. So long way of saying, I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for women at this time and women of color. And yes, there are a lot of other challenges, but I would say stay focused on the positive and stay focused on the activities and the initiatives that are aligned with getting you to where you want to go.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it's about the personal effort, right?
Right.
You're focusing on what companies are doing or saying, and what they're actually executing on. But our part is what now? How can we align? How can we be strategic with it? And how can we contribute in that effort? I know at State Street, I'm very proud that we announced our 10 actions against addressing racism and inequality, and have been just a concerted effort, a strategic effort to work towards them. Our CEO is a chair of that Inclusion Diversity Council that is monitoring, and our chief diversity officer. So many folks that have volunteered and raised their, I'll be a part of it. I want to be a part of it. So, to your point, raise your hands and jump in, right? Internally and externally, connect with the folks that are doing what they're saying. So I do appreciate that. I didn't know if there was anything else that you can share as women of color, Black and brown people, even allies, if there's something we can all do to kind of take advantage of that DE&I focus right now in time, because such a key thing is it's so pivotal right now.
Absolutely.
Like you said, DE&I, women's rights, as we all know, the controversial things going on right now, but it's just such a pivotal time. And for example, I have attended the recent National Association of Securities Professionals Conference in Chicago, and we had some speakers that shared, like, the fight is now.
Right.
The fight is now, and what so when we say that, what does that mean? How can we transition that into action?
Yeah, love it, love it, love it. And I'm all about action, because, talk is great, but action's a lot better. And so, to extend that thought, having an action plan, I'm a big planner, and I spend a lot of time planning. I spend a lot of time writing, and it's really important to, if you haven't already done it, if you don't have an action plan, get one and write it down, right? So your vision, your goals, and all of that. And you may need to adjust it, because I think before things were even harder to move the needle relative to DE&I, I think this is a time where people are actually listening, right? So make sure that you revisit perhaps some of those areas that you may have thought, well, don't know if the organization is ready for this just yet, and try it out. Leverage your allies and the people who are in your network to have the conversation. I'm also a big believer in, if you're not sure about how it may play in the larger space, start small, practice with the people practice with the people who support you, test it out, but don't wait too long. You really have to move forward with your action plan. And so what's the worst that can happen? If you don't ask, then the answer is going to be no, just by default, right? And if you do ask, there are lots of different possibilities. It could be yes, it could be later, not now, but later. It could be you have a lot more variables, and I do think that you're more likely to get a yes now. So get your action plan together. Find your supporters in your network as you're thinking about, who's in my network? How can I be more effective in my job, in my workplace? Don't forget your boss. And I know some people are like, oh, my boss is the last person. However, I'm not asking you to be best friends with your boss. I'm asking you to consider your boss and what that person needs to hear and see in order to be supportive, or at least be neutral and not be
antagonistic.
You down.
Yeah.
Just saying. Okay. So factor them into the equation, and be mindful and strategic about how you manage that relationship. Ideally, it'd be great to have your boss in your network, because they have a lot of say in terms of your immediate experience. But whatever it is, just make sure you come up with an action plan that includes your boss, your peers, the people in the areas with whom you work the most, and of course, your external network as well. Never put your eggs all in one basket, but make sure you're getting some support from all of the different areas. And volunteer, right? There, you mentioned a lot of initiatives that are underway, some of them controversial, some of them that came out of the aftermath of George Floyd. Find something to get involved with. Find something to make sure your brand is seen. If you are not seen and heard, people are not thinking about you. It's just human nature. And so, for the people who put their heads down and think, you know what, I'm just doing a great job. They should see it. They should know that I'm doing a great job and they should reward me. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's not necessarily how it works. It's the people who blow their own horn, so get comfortable doing it if you don't. And the people who document their accomplishments, the people who build strong support systems with allies and have strong networks, that are the people who are more likely to be moved ahead. So don't assume, that things are just going to happen because you're so great. Yes, you're great. We're all fabulous. But there are other people too who are being considered. So what differentiates you? Why choose you? And you have to answer that question, and you have to give people the evidence and the support and the data to say yes.
Yeah, that's such a key. Like you said, maybe phrase it in a way to give them the adjectives that you want folks to refer to you. But you said something that really resonated, that I'm hoping folks really grabbed that nugget, was, in a safe space, right? Practice it or reach out in those safe spaces, which I'm always been such an advocate. Employee networks and all those organizations that people are part of. I know at State Street we have quite a few. We've got so many, and I appreciate being a part of them for my years at State Street. I've been the co-chair for the Black Professionals Group. I'm now the co-chair for the Professional Women's Network, and it is a safe space to practice these concepts, these ideas, these programs, and get a whole rallying team behind you or next to you and aligning with you to practice it here and then amplify in another place. So safe space, create that action plan, find ways to be seen, because long gone are the days, oh, you're doing a great job, let me come and put you on that stage. Know that that's not the way it works, and that's not strategic networking, right? So that's certainly what we want to gain here. So as I mentioned at the top of the hour, Juliette has an awesome podcast, and I want to kind of dive into that a little bit more. And then we're going to be soon opening up for Q&A. So go ahead and get your questions ready. I wanted to just ask you, you have this successful career as a podcast personality now, which is exciting. A lot of folks have been getting their, that's another way to be seen too, getting their messages across there. And you have been known to say that you are living the dream.
Yes.
So I have to ask, because you are the expert at this, at building networking in your career path, how much do you attribute this living the dream moment to networking, and how can we really relish building that muscle, right? Building that networking muscle like you have, so that we can all kind of live that dream.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I would say, in terms of how much I attribute it to networking, quite frankly, a lot. If I had to choose a percentage, because of course you do need to have the 3 C's, as I like to say, competence, credibility, and confidence. and making sure you have the education. And so once you've checked the box on the foundational entry kinds of things, then the rest of it is about the relationship. And the higher you go, the more critical the relationship is. And people often say, I really love my job. If it wasn't for the people, I would really like to. And actually, it's all about the people. So you have to learn to hone those skills, the people skills, the networking skills, and all of those tools, because I do attribute a significant amount of my accomplishments and what I've achieved to networking. I mean, I've had people call me or just reach out to me, and they'll say, I just saw your newsletter, and that reminded me of, okay, that's branding, right? The newsletter is a form of branding. Or I had the most phenomenal compliment yesterday. Someone who has a successful podcast had reached out to me and said, I love your podcast. The content is great. The quality is great. And I'm like, yes, And so again, networking, but so the combination of those, the branding, the networking, being visible, all of those things go into keeping you top of mind and making sure that they're proof points too, because when you put things out into the marketplace, yeah, they're a risk. And there are times I put some things out on, let's say, LinkedIn, and only 3 people may like it. I'm like, what's up with that? I have all these followers. That's okay. The key is to be consistent. And the key is to make sure you have high quality, to continue to cultivate your network, and to make sure that you are producing a high quality product. And the most important thing that needs to come across as a high quality product is you. You are a brand. And so, yeah, I would say absolutely that networking is a huge, huge part of what I do. And just one thing about the podcast, because I do hope that you'll put the link in the chat and that people will check it out. It's called Entering the Inspiration Zone, and it's a podcast for professional development and positive connection. Or if you listen to the trailer, it's actually for the other way around, positive connection and professional development. And it covers a range of topics, but I would love for you, this audience, for you to get engaged, send me your feedback, get involved. We have an ecosystem as women of color as well. And we have to support each other. We have to be there for each other. I'm just so, Anna, I have admired, just as she mentioned, she admired my work. I have admired what she has done with her conference and her platforms over these 10 years. And I was actually at her one of her conferences, and she reached out to me and said, hey, thank you for attending. Would love to have you on. And here I am, networking. So it really, really does work. So I hope you'll take it to heart and put some actions in place.
Absolutely. I hope everyone will check it out. I'll continue to do so myself. And likewise, Anna is an expert in branding and sharing the different methods. I love what you said. So folks, our audience need to think about, they all don't need to have a podcast. They all don't need to have a website and start a business, but it is about what content can you put out that shows your thoughts, your adjectives, your perspectives that folks can really follow up on. So appreciate you hitting on that. So confidence, competence, and credibility to contribute to that message. And in this day and age, look, we're talking about connecting. How do we get that content out? You're doing the podcast, so it's irrelevant necessarily to literally shake hands, right? We're in a hybrid environment now, and I appreciate we're still able to connect this and get this content out to folks in this virtual format. A lot of people are working from home and we're not going to all the networking events like we used to. I'm grateful the conferences are returning. Hopefully, Maven's World will be having theirs next year as well, but in person. But in the meantime, we know that you need to be strategic. What advice can you give folks who are primarily remote, or how do we, navigate this hybrid space to really be strategic in our networking?
Yeah, it's very, very important. I heard someone say the other day, well, when we get back to in person, I'm going to blah, 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 right? And I think we have to acknowledge that we have forever shifted that dynamic, and we will never be back to 100% in person. And for those who are remote or who are in a hybrid environment, you have to seize the moment and take advantage of this opportunity to continue to build your brand and to network strategically. So how do you do that? I don't really see my coworkers that often. We only get together in meetings. Well, initiate that conversation. I am a huge fan of what I call coffee Zooms. And it's like, okay, I know we're all Zoomed out. It doesn't have to be an hour long. It can be 15 minutes where you can say, I can say, hey, Nathalie, I just thought about our conversation last week or whatever. Would love to schedule just 15 minutes to catch up. Want to hear what you're up to. Would love to share with you what I'm up to. And so then you schedule a informal coffee chat and you listen to the other person first, let them share about what it is they're doing, show interest and be there to support them. And then you share what you're doing and what you're up to and so forth. And you can do that with friends, with your coworkers, or you're in a meeting. And I encourage those of you who are leading meetings to allow space and time for people to connect, even if it's 5 minutes. So I'm a huge fan as when you come into a meeting to really check in with people. How is everyone doing? But really mean it. Because how many times you've been into a meeting, it's like, how's everybody doing? So our agenda today is, right? It's like, well, do you really care how I'm feeling? Because I'm actually not feeling very well right now because I just found out that so-and-so got shot, So it's really important to make space and time for those real conversations, even within meetings. Another opportunity to connect is through volunteer kind of platforms. And so when you go to those and they have the breakout rooms and so forth, take advantage of those. Don't wait for, okay, I don't really want to go to that part because it's not live, so I'm not going to do that. Probably fewer people will be in that space. And so it's even more of an opportunity for you to connect with people. My point is leverage the technology that you have, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Teams, whether it's whatever your platform is, to stay connected digitally. And so virtual networking is here to stay. Actually, in my third book, and I am excited to say I am going to be, Forbes is publishing my third book. Woohoo! And so I have an entire chapter on virtual networking, because it is critical that those of us who are digital immigrants, my daughter is a digital native. I'm a digital immigrant. We have to learn how to do things differently, right? So don't have it be an excuse. Make sure you are deliberate and intentional about reaching out, and make it fun. There are all kinds of ways in which you can do that.
Absolutely. Then there's all kinds of people that you can be like, so we're in a hybrid environment, but you have a hybrid opportunity to connect with different folks. So I do appreciate that and hope folks are taking advantage. I'm so excited about your third book. Do you want to share a little bit more? Is there a teaser in there that you can?
That's a teaser.
Tell us more about? Okay. All right. So
more to come.
Publishing on that, and be sure to check out her website. Be sure to check out her podcast. More information will be coming about that third book, which I cannot wait to get my hands on. And speaking of checking out the different platforms that you can, find out what's next that's coming out from Juliette Mayers. Social media just plays such a huge part of our lives, right? We're, like you just mentioned, maximize technology, maximize the different ways that we can connect. People can blog, people can connect for brief meetings and Zooms and all of that. Which platform do you, here we are, our Maven of networking. What platform do you maximize for that, for effective networking?
Right. So this one really, it depends on the person, but I will tell you, for me, LinkedIn is where it's at.
Okay.
And so if you're in an environment where most of my buyers and my community are on LinkedIn. And so for me, although there are a lot of wonderful platforms out there, I don't spend as much time. I think I have a TikTok account. I don't even think I do. So I don't spend as much time on Facebook. I tend to Facebook for personal, and LinkedIn for professional. And I have a Twitter account. I don't tweet as much, although I should be tweeting more. But of course, I have, as you mentioned, I have a lot going on, right? I have a DEI consulting practice. I have I'm a writer. I have a strategic networking is a key part of also the work that I do. And I need to be very specific and strategic about how I spend my time and with whom. The same thing that I'm sharing with you is what I follow. And so for me, it's about LinkedIn. And so if your audience is a professional audience and you're not on LinkedIn, you're missing out on a tremendous opportunity. But don't just create a LinkedIn account. You need to post. You need to go in and like other people. I never understand where people who are, I think some of our folks need to be a little more gracious, right? What is it if somebody has an achievement? Don't begrudge them, celebrate them. And so I would love to see more of us, right?
Yes. Yes.
Supporting each other in these platforms. And so LinkedIn, make sure you use the get to know the technology, get to know that's for me. Figure out what works best for you. For many of you, Instagram may be a better platform for you if there's something that's more visual, a product or what have you. And so whatever that is, figure out what's best for you and be consistent with it. Make sure your audience knows where to find you, and make sure you know how to use the tool.
Yeah,
I want to hear from you all. So Juliette C. Mayers, so connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yes, we'll be sharing your LinkedIn link in a moment if it hasn't gone already. So please be on the lookout for that. But you can always search practically. So very, very intentionally, Juliette Mayers on LinkedIn. But that's such a key point. Like that happens to be your platform that, is where your audience is. And I think that that's such a element that our attendees need to really focus on. Think of your audience. What platform do they use? A lot of folks, it will be Instagram or Twitter or what have you. And consistency of content. I know you mentioned that as another key element. I remember hearing from another colleague that was key about actually like scheduling it like meetings. I'm going to get my content every Saturday night, every Monday morning, every Thursday, and be consistent with it, or once a month. It doesn't need to be every day or weekly or what have you, but be consistent with it, as Juliette just shared with us as well. So folks, feel free to share any questions in the comments there. We definitely have a few more that we can keep chatting with Juliette, but I want to include you in the conversation. Hopefully we're just checking off the questions that you would have asked anyway. But, I just want to maximize the moment that we have with Ms. Mayers joining us today. Tell us, I would love to learn a little bit more about like you said, you actually exercise exactly what you practice. Several platforms that you communicate all these amazing tips and tricks and all those things. Your newsletter, how can folks find out about that? We're going to share the link, but what kind of content do you share on there?
Yeah. So it's funny, I started this newsletter a couple of years ago, and quite honestly, there were months where I'm like, you know what, this is a pain in the butt. I'm just being real. I don't have time for this. And I'm like, okay, you need to be consistent. And I have to say, I'm very fortunate because my daughter works with me now, and her name is Danielle, and she is amazing in terms of her ability to curate, and she's taught herself a lot of things in terms of design and so forth. And it's with her help and her support that I've been able to maintain that consistency. But quite frankly, I would have either stopped the newsletter rather than being inconsistent or having it not be of quality. And so the kinds of things I share in there are topics having to do with DEI, strategic networking, events. And I try to keep everything that I do inspirational, because that is indeed my passion, is about helping people achieve their dreams, whether it's a corporate client or whether it's an individual that I'm working with. It's really important to me to have something positive to say. I don't live in la la land, so don't get don't get me wrong, but I do protect my mental health and try to focus on the things that are going well. And so in the newsletter, you'll find information about whether the most recent podcast. Sometimes I'll have an interview with someone. I try to lift up others as well. And so we will highlight institutions or people who we think people may not know well much about or what have you. So one month we featured the LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. Another month we may even send out opportunities to support different organizations. But the bottom line is always a message from me in terms of that particular month, what we're focused on with it. And sometimes it's a short message, sometimes it's a longer message. But it's been going now for, like I said, a couple of years. And I welcome feedback. And quite frankly, like I mentioned before, it's one of the ways I stay top of mind. So people may read, oh yeah, I saw your newsletter and it reminded me of X, right? So whether it's a newsletter or whatever it is that you choose, be consistent and make sure that your network knows where to find you and stay visible to your network.
Perfect. And again, so many just key elements there that I'm hoping folks are jotting those down. You said something so key that I think is so important, especially in these times, is self-care. So wherever folks gain that inspiration, make that your commitment to yourself, right? You're networking with your own mental, but just self-care. And so sign up for that newsletter or whatever content that you need to keep being invigorated, because we're having some trying times that we're going to continue to keep fighting. That was Rosalind Parker of Walgreens that was here as a featured guest, and Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, who really, just resonated with that message of we've come so far. And I think all of us can agree there's so much more work to do. But at least we've got a lot more allies raising their hands. We've got a different frame of reference that folks are ready to hear the message, I believe. So I'm not seeing any other questions come in. I want to just make sure that we're good to go.
I think they're mostly comments.
Yeah, we appreciate all the love coming in. Juliette Mayers, she is amazing. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Juliette, you're I love you when we just have conversations. Like I swear I just bring a notebook just to listen to you. But you did mention something else that I'm hoping folks really grab. Even brief coffee chats, virtual, could be that key that you don't even realize can go to the next opportunity. I'm a connector by nature. So I love actually just having those conversations where you don't even realize we're all 1 degree away from something amazing, of idea, a program, a blog, what have you, that can inspire and ripple to so many others. So I appreciate that. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap. Juliette, I thank you so much for your time and content that you share with us. And we're so excited for your third book. I think we're going to close out, and I'm going to shoot it over to Anna to close us out.
Hello, it's Anna Foster here, CEO and founder of a Maven's World lifestyle brand. Thank you for joining us today for part 4 of the Future of Women of Color series. In today's session, Success Through Networking for Women of Color, with author, speaker, Juliette Mayers. Today's session has been a thought-provoking and impactful discussion, and I hope you are inspired by it. If you have not done so already, please be sure to connect with us via our website, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and our social media handles at A Maven's World. Also, be sure to connect with our esteemed, wonderful speakers via LinkedIn. Thank you to our major sponsor, State Street Bank. Thank you to our other sponsors, Wellington Management, Mass General Brigham, Eastern Bank, and the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to our partners, Boston Impact Initiative, National Society of Black Engineers, National Black MBA Association of Boston, Mass, Startup Life by Andy Lyons, Amplify Latinx, The Dinner Group, and the African American Women in Higher Education. Everyone, please take great care of yourselves and each other. We look forward to seeing you again soon.